You, Dr. Rand Paul. Dr. Paul is the middle son of Congressman Ron Paul. Like his father, he's a physician. Dr. Paul's professional field is eye surgery, though he also has a liking for politics and a love for liberty. Rand Paul also is involved in healthcare reform and founded the Southern Kentucky Lions Eye Clinic, which provides eye surgery and exams for those who can otherwise not afford proper care. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very pleased to have with us today the proud son of Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. Let's give a warm Atlanta welcome to Rand Paul.
Myself, my father, and my family to your revolution.
Thank you!
The revolution is just beginning. Tuesday's the beginning, not the end of this. Several of your speakers have said this goes on. It does. This is the beginning. You've come together, you've found each other. This is the beginning. Keep the movement alive. Keep it going after Tuesday. I have some good news from out west. My dad has been traveling out west, and I was out in Montana last week. We have a chance of winning in Montana. Only 1,600 people get to vote, the precinct chairman, and they had about 300 or 400 empty spots, and guess who filled them? We have a chance in Alaska. Second place in Nevada. Second place in Nevada. We think we have a chance in Maine. And you know, one of the places we have the highest polling, double-digit polling, Georgia. My family made me promise one thing when I went on the road, and that was that I wouldn't sing. I did enjoy the song. That's a great song, and I do have a lyric that it's been in my brain for a while. It's a lyric from Rush. Glittering prizes and endless compromises shatter the illusion of integrity. When I think of the Republican Party and the Republican primary, I think of endless compromises, and I think of the biggest story of this primary season. The media doesn't get it. They're interested in who's winning which primary. The biggest story of this primary season is that the Republican Party is shrinking. And they haven't always looked like they want you in their party. They better wake up, because we're bringing new people, young people, people with some other ideas, but we're also hearkening back to some of their own ideas. Their platform's not that bad if they would just abide by it. The Republican Party needs to wake up, find their roots, and also find the new people here today who could inject some power into their party again. In Iowa, 3 times more Democrats voted than Republican. In Nevada, it was the same way. South Carolina, the same way. More Democrats than Republicans are voting. The Republican Party is shrinking, and they need to wake up. The endless compromises. We now have 7 years of a Bush administration where we've added $3 trillion to the national debt. One of the reporters earlier asked, he says, are you attacking the Republican Party? Are you running against the Republican Party? No, we're running for what the Republican Party used to stand for. One of the speakers mentioned Barry Goldwater. Well, I had the pleasure when I was in New Hampshire of campaigning with his son, Barry Goldwater Jr., a few weeks ago. And he used to serve in Congress also, and served with my father in Congress. And he got on Fox News one day, and you know, Fox had just excluded us from one of those debates, even though we'd beaten Giuliani 5 out of 6 times, beaten Thompson. We were still excluded. And so Barry Goldwater gets on stage and he says, interviewing, it's a remote, so the woman's in another city, and he gets on there and he says, Fox ought to be ashamed for not having Ron Paul in the debates. him and she said, "Did you come on our station just to bash Fox?" And he kind of looked at her and he said, thought about it and he said, "Fox ought to be ashamed for not having Ron Paul in the debate." In 1821, John Quincy Adams spoke in front of the House. He was the Secretary of the State at that time. And he has a quote that I really take to heart and I think really sums up a lot of what we need to think about in our foreign policy. And he said, "America does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She's the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She's the champion and vindicator only of her own. She will recommend to the general cause by the countenance of her voice and the benign sympathy of her example. But she well knows that when she becomes enlisted under banners other than her own, she will become involved beyond the powers of extrication." The maxims of her foreign policy would insensibly change from liberty to force. She might well become the dictatress of the world. She would no longer be the ruler of her own spirit. We've drifted so far from our founding fathers and from our message that when my father stands up and says exactly what the founding fathers said about avoiding entangling alliances, they accuse him of being an isolationist. Isolationism is name-calling. Nobody wants to be an isolationist. It's much different than a policy of non-intervention. Just because you do not want to have an aggressive foreign policy that is searching out and seeking enemies and wars abroad doesn't mean that you want to build a wall around your country. Doesn't mean we don't want to engage with the world. My father makes a good point, and he turns this around on them and he says, "You know what? 7 years of George Bush have made us diplomatically isolated. We no longer talk to the world. We no longer have any diplomacy. We go it our own way, and it usually means by war." It is dangerous, and our founding fathers knew it was dangerous, to let power gravitate to the executive. They feared very much a monarchy. They feared an imperial presidency. They set restrictions on the presidency because they wanted to avoid the endless wars of Europe that had gone on for centuries and centuries. When we set these limits, though, where we had set these limits, we now seem to ignore them. Not only did we go into Iraq without a formal declaration of war, George Bush now maintains that he can attack Iran with no further vote. No further vote of the people, no further vote of Congress. And here's how bad even the Democrats are. You'd think, are we supposed to have two parties so someone will oppose this? Hillary Clinton says she might begin bringing troops home in 2013 in her second term. Well, I sure hope she doesn't get a first term, much less a second term. George Bush has maintained that his powers as commander-in-chief are virtually unlimited. And the Democrats, when they had a chance, there was legislation recently, they had proposed putting in the legislation at the very least saying that if you want to go to war with Iran, you have to come back and ask the Congress. Not even a formal declaration, but at least ask. But you know what? The Democrats wimped out and pulled it out because they're afraid of their own shadow. They're afraid of being accused of being unpatriotic. Why do you think they call something the Patriot Act? Because if you oppose it, they'll call you unpatriotic. They've made people fearful of standing up for things that we have stood for, that our founding fathers stood for, and they want to make you feel unpatriotic because you believe in the rule of law. James Madison said that the Constitution supposes what history demonstrates, that the executive is the power most interested in war and most prone to it. The Constitution has, therefore, with studied care, vested that power in the legislature.